All right, well, today we begin in the book of First Corinthians in chapter 13, and we find here a biblical definition of love. Reading now from verse 4. Love waits patiently. Love shows kindness. Love does not burn with envy, does not brag, is not inflated with its own importance, does not behave with ill-mannered impropriety. It is not preoccupied with the interests of the self, does not become exasperated from peevishness, does not keep a reckoning up of evil. Love does not take pleasure in doing wrong. Love joyfully celebrates the truth. Love never tires of support, never loses faith, never exhausts hope. Love never gives up. Love never ends. I believe every phrase of this passage deserves special consideration, and so we are going to go through all of this very closely. But before we do, I think it's worthwhile to take a step back and look at what we've just read on a more general level, because I think we can learn one very important thing about love by taking all of this in as a whole, and that is that love is others-orientated and God-fearing. We know that the Bible teaches us that Jesus himself taught us when he was on earth that the greatest commandment is to love God with all that you are and to love others as yourself. And so there is certainly resonance here with that. If the greatest commandment is to love God and to love others, and Jesus taught us that if we keep this commandment, then literally every other commandment that we find in the Bible is going to be fulfilled in doing this, then it goes without saying that understanding love and getting love right is of the utmost importance to living the Christian life. In fact, there may not be a more important message from the Bible for a Christian than the message that we have today here about love. And so we are going to go through each phrase this morning, and this is what we will do. First, we will understand what each phrase tells us about love. We were going to note how love is being defined in the Bible. And then, secondly, we will be asking ourselves this question as we learn all of this. Does this reflect what my life looks like, right? Is God's love showing itself in my life in these specific ways? Or are these areas where I need to have some growth in? Okay, well, so here we go. Let's get to the first phrase. We come to this one first. Love waits patiently. Well, there is a time and a season for all things. And in many things, there is a way to go about our life that honors God more than other ways. And we must recognize that doing things in their proper time, waiting for certain things in God's timing, that's a huge indicator of whether or not we are really living a life of love. And since this is true, then what is the enemy of love is to be led by our own impulsiveness rather than God's timing. It is to indulge oftentimes in the easy way rather than doing things the right way. It is to give ourselves justifications for sinful behavior. It is to take what God has not given and to have it on our own terms and by our own timetable. Love waits patiently because love fears God. Love cares more about what God thinks than even what our own hearts desire. Love understands that deferred satisfaction is always wiser and more God-honoring than impulsive, greedy, immediate gratification. If we indulge our own pleasure rather than waiting for God's best, then we are falling short of love. Love shows kindness. We read that also. Now, kindness can mean a lot of different things, I think, to different people. But you know what? Biblically speaking, the word kindness means to have and to show a genuine concern for others. The opposite of kindness, then, would be apathy, really, to just not care about anyone else in our lives. Kindness can be demonstrated in many, many different ways, and because the kindness depends on the situation and the specifics of any given circumstance. For instance, if we did a nice thing, and now I'm saying nice, not kind, but what if we did a nice thing to somebody, but that thing that we did was not actually for the real benefit of that person, then that nice thing was not a kind thing. Now, there are many nice things that we might say, many nice things that we might do for people, but we really only do those nice things because we simply don't care enough to do the right thing for them. This niceness is really then just a fake kindness. Because there are things that we can do for people which in the moment they would not consider to be very nice, but which were really what was best for them. And so it was actually the kindest thing to do. There are many examples of this, but one I think that we can all understand quite easily is when we are training our children to be wise adults. You see, we know that the job of parenting is to train our children to be wise adults. It's not to please our children's immediate moods and desires. The job of parenting is not to be nice. It is to be kind, of course, but not necessarily always to be nice. If we were just nice and always just gave our kids whatever pleased them, well, do that would be catastrophic to their future selves. And really, it would be pretty bad for our own future lives as well, because we would raise foolish children. In this way, love is kind. So, if we are living with false niceness in everything we do, but not actually a genuine concern for others, then we are almost assuredly falling short of love. Now we come to the next one. Love does not burn with envy. As we know, envy is an emotion. It's a negative feeling, which comes upon us based on the good fortune of others. If we see that somebody has a better car, then we may feel envy. If we see that someone's living in a better and a nicer and a bigger house, well, then we might feel envy. If they get that promotion or that job that we really wanted, well, we may feel envy. It's kind of like when we're sitting at the doctor's and they hit our knee with that little rubber hammer. Feelings can be reflexive. Now, that doesn't mean that it's okay to feel those feelings of envy or any other negative feeling necessarily, but, it's at least not unloving to simply feel them, like a flash of them, in a moment of weakness. We're all human. But, burning with envy, which is what we find here in our passage, well, I think we can all see that's quite different. Burning with envy is to let envy have the reins of our heart. It is to allow ourselves to be motivated by envy, for this negative feeling to start directing our actions, and so that we are treating other people differently based on the fact that we envy them. Maybe we steal from them. Or maybe not something so dramatic. Maybe we just cut them down with our words because we're envious of how popular they are, how much people like them. Maybe we start to work against them in other ways so that they lose the things that they have that we wanted, and we think somehow that's going to make us feel better. But the truth is, if we love someone, we will find a way to be happy for the good fortune that has come into their life. It is okay now. Pray God for that good fortune to come our way also, There's nothing wrong with taking those feelings and asking God, right, for the things that maybe we feel we are lacking in our life. In fact, God wants us to do that. But here's the thing, we cannot turn those feelings of envy or any other negative feeling against other people. If we are doing this in any way, then we are falling short of love. Here's the next one. Love does not brag. It is not inflated with its own importance, right? Now, this is one of those things that on the list that gets two phrases to describe it. And that is because to brag is really the outward expression of the second phrase, which is a description of pride. Now listen now, it is not wrong to be proud of something good that we have done if that pride is based on a realistic appraisal of our own contribution and is not at the expense of others. In other words, we're also giving credit to all of those people who helped us. This is what that second part is really getting at, inflated with its own importance. And the image I get, at least, is of a balloon, right? A balloon with just enough air is fine, but we all know what happens if we just keep pumping more air into a balloon, more than should realistically be in the balloon, right? Eventually, the amount of air in that balloon is not realistic. And that balloon is going to be coming back into contact with reality in short order. Pop. Now, we all realize that this kind of pride, this kind of conceit, this is sinful. But it may be interesting to find this mentioned actually where it is here, which is in the context of talking about love. See, but there is a good reason for that, because whenever we are inflating our own importance, there is always something else that we are doing. There's other people around us, there's other people in our life, right, who are starting to look less and less important. And you see, this is what happens when we brag. We are vocalizing an unrealistic portrayal of ourselves. It is a distortion of reality, and when, of course, we distort reality around who we are, then the people in our lives, because we're all connected to each other, of course, but that distortion begins to also then distort other people as well. If we are bragging about ourselves, it is impossible to avoid diminishing others. And so if we are diminishing others, we are not appreciating them. Well, we're too busy appreciating ourselves, aren't we? And so what we learn from this is that if we are diminishing others, we are minimizing them and the part that they had to play in our lives. Well, we are falling short of love. Now here's the next one. The next one here is, love does not behave with ill-mannered impropriety. Now this one here is about respect. And how we respect people is, quite honestly, to act with dignity and civility. It is biblical, my friends, as we learn today, to have manners. Remember this when you are fighting with the good fight at home, with your children around the dinner table. For I know it seems at times like a thankless battle to teach our children civility, but when we teach our children manners, just remember we are teaching them to respect themselves and to respect others. And in doing this, we are teaching them to love. My friends, this aspect of love goes far beyond the dinner table, which I'm sure we all know. It extends to our driving. It extends to how we practice our politics. It goes to how we deal with our co-workers and our bosses, yes, even the ones we don't like, especially the ones we don't like. We do not have to be fond of someone to be polite. Now, impropriety speaks to what is proper for any given situation, and manners and being polite go hand in hand in what is proper for most situations. But there are situations where it might be considered appropriate to not be polite. Now, those are very rare, and I'll leave this caveat to your own imagining, but to figure out what I'm talking about. But having said that, I think we can all say that if we are behaving in a way that shows disrespect to ourselves or to others, then in most cases, most likely, we are falling short of love. We also learn here in our passage that love is not preoccupied with self-interest. Now, it should go without saying that everyone should be looking after themselves. We should not be neglecting ourselves. We should not be harming ourselves. We should not be making choices that are to our own detriment. I think we can see that this phrase about love does not tell us that self-interest is necessarily wrong, but it is telling us that a preoccupation with our own self-interest is. It is not loving to be consumed only with what is best for us. To state this positively, I think we could say that love is considerate of others. Love thinks about the feelings of others. Even if we don't agree, we at least say, well, they're having feelings, right? They're valid. I think it concerns itself with the thoughts and opinions of others. Again, we don't have to agree with them, but at least we have respect for that person to have freedom to have those thoughts and opinions. Again, we consider that. You see, love just isn't self-centered. Rather, it should be others-orientated. Love sets aside time for others. Love doesn't do only what's important to the self, but rather, listen, if we love someone, we think about and actually participate in things that are important to them, right? And so, and the other thing too is that we need to make time for other people. That's very important to living a life of love. Making time. That's considering others. Think about this. It's what our kids need, isn't it? It's what our wife needs. And wives, it's what your husband needs. It's what our elderly parents need. Hey, it's even what our church family needs from us. Listen, it's important to take time to strengthen the bonds of the people that matter to us. And listen, if we are failing to consider the needs of others, to set aside time for them, to value their thoughts and their feelings, then I think what we will find is that we are, in fact, falling short of love. Now, we also learn that love does not keep a reckoning up of evil. Now, one way to put this, I'm sorry, not there. We're going to get to that one next. Let's not skip this one. This one's important. Love does not become exasperated from peevishness. Actually, the two of these go together, and we're going to see how they connect in a second. But this first one, love does not become exasperated from peevishness. So here we find that it is unloving to indulge in pet peeves. Now, we all have them, right? The reality is we are all going to have those little things that drive us crazy that other people do. Little things like putting the toilet paper roll backwards on the hanger. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should probably look into that. There is an optimal way. What about the toilet seat up or the toilet seat down? What about squeezing the toothpaste or rolling the toothpaste, But seriously, it's interesting how many things pertaining to the bathroom are things to be peevish about. We can be peevish about a lot of things, I think, and actually, more than anything specific, I think we all know this, that we can just have bad days. We can have times when we are just feeling more irritable than others. It's not actually a sin to have a bad day. Don't worry about that. But like many other things that we've talked about this morning, it is not okay to let that peevishness, to let that irritability kind of get out of control. To start like boiling over and starting to treat other people unfairly because of how we're feeling. You see, as we've read here, love does not become exasperated from peevishness. Now, ideally, if we love someone, we can overlook a lot of things that might irk us, not even mention them, honestly. Ideally, even if we're just having a bad day, then we can have enough self-awareness to stop at some point during that bad day. Now, the earlier the better, I would say, but just to say to ourselves, you know what, this is just going to be one of those days for me. And we can then resolve to measure all of those negative feelings, all of those things that start irking us, right? We can start measuring all of that based on the fact that we know we're just having a bad day. And so hopefully that can prevent us from being unfair to others based on the fact that we are simply having a bad day. We all have them. Now, a positive way perhaps then to state this one is to say that love practices self-control. And so I think what we learn from this is that if we are letting our bad days, our negative feelings, okay, that we might have that maybe aren't really justified, at least to the extent that we want to express them, if we're letting those things affect others in treating them unfairly, right, the people in our lives, then we are falling short of love. And related to this one, as we were saying, is this next one. Love does not keep a reckoning up of evil. And now, one way to put this, and especially in light of what we have just been speaking of, and that is to turn kind of this around on the other person, because we know, hey, love, it's got to have some sort of mutuality, right? And so this phrase comes along to say, yeah, that first one, remember that one. We shouldn't be letting our bad days run wild. We shouldn't be letting ourselves get exasperated with people based on peevishness. But then this one comes along and says, on the other hand, love also isn't going to be holding somebody else's bad day against them. See? Another way to put this is to say, if we love someone, then we are not writing down a list of ways that they fall short, right? And then consigning them as a human being to the dustbin of existence for all of their mistakes. If we love someone, okay, we are not saying we forgive them, but then the next time we have an argument, well then, listen, well, I've got this thing here, and I got this thing here, and you there, and remember when you did that, and remember when you did that, and, that's the thing we can find happening in any type of relationship that's more long-term. Any type of relationship, right? So easy to bring up those past grievances, the airing of grievances, right? And then every disagreement then can turn into the same fight. And that fight happens again and again in the exact same way. The same old things are being trotted out every time. You know what? If this is happening to us in any relationship in our life, then, this verse really needs to speak to us. I would say to state this one positively, love forgives. And what I mean is it really forgives. It forgives in a way that puts past mistakes, which have been dealt with, but it puts them away for good. They are not stored up in a little box that we keep in our back pocket, saved for later, in case of the next fight. No. You see, love forgives in a way that says, you know what, I value our future and our potential together way more than the mistakes that we've both made in the past. So I'm going to put that away, and we are going to focus on what we can have right now and building on right now what we can have in the future. And so if we find that we are keeping a record of ways that someone has wronged us, and we are holding on to that, and not really dealing with those issues in productive ways, then I think this verse reminds us that that is falling short of love, and we do that. Now on to this next one. Love takes no pleasure in doing wrong. This phrase teaches us that love always seeks the good. Love does what is right. Now listen, that is because love is from God. Now this is a very important verse. We may not even realize how important it is, but let me tell you, It is a very common thing to see many things being justified in the name of love simply because it's done and we say, well, it was love. Well, that automatically then justifies whatever it is we did. No, love doesn't work that way. Because we cannot call something by the name of love which leads other people or ourselves into sin. Remember back at the very beginning of this message, we said that more generally speaking, what? Love is others-orientated and God-fearing. Well, this is what that second part really means. Love is never a justification for sinful acts. Let's put it this way. Love is never pleased with things that are not pleasing to God. It is the height of foolishness to assume simply because something pleases us, well, that must necessarily please God. He's just happy for me, let me tell you. No. Love does not settle for sin. Love does not settle for compromised situations and standards. I'm sorry. Love wants the best possible good for the other person. Love wants God's best for them. And if we want less than God's best for someone, we are falling short of love. Now here's this next one. Love joyfully celebrates in the truth. Truth and love are very closely tied in the Bible. Love cannot be based on a lie, my friends. Love cannot breathe the air of half-truths and manipulations, without genuineness, without authenticity, without the open air of truthful communication and honest, forthright actions. Love will suffocate and die. It is no secret that love can only thrive when there is trust between people. And trust, my friends, cannot exist but in the light of truth. And so as people who want to obey God, because I know we are, and we want to show God's love and to really love the people that we have in our lives. Well, listen now, it is very important that we see this, that we see how important it is to be truthful people. And by truthful people, I don't mean, well, we tell the truth most of the time. No. Not just people who tell the truth. Truthful people. Because if we aren't, and if we let the seeds of distrust grow, because listen, if we're not truthful people, then inevitably the seeds of distrust will grow up around us. And if we let that happen, then what we are going to find is that everything that we thought about love, all of the people that we thought loved us and that we loved them, the joy will be stolen from those relationships. Without truth, my friends. And if we weren't truthful, if we aren't truthful, the only way to really get that back, and it's not easy, but it's to come clean. And then it's to start practicing truthfulness consistently as soon as possible. So important, so important. And now finally we come to the closing sentence of all of this. We're just going to read these together. They just all go hand in hand. Love never tires of support, never loses faith, never exhausts hope, never gives up. Love never ends. If we truly love someone, then we are going to be with that person all the way. We're never going to give up on that person, even if they turn away from us, even if they choose to leave. There is still a part of us, at least, which wants the best for them. If they went on a very bad path, which most likely they did, then we're praying for them, that they would find the right path again, that they would find a place of repentance. That's what love does sometimes. It just prays for the other person to find repentance. Maybe that's all we can do. There are times when a relationship must end. I think we all realize that for various reasons. There are legitimate reasons to end a relationship. So we're not taking this verse to mean something it doesn't. But just because a relationship ends, if love was really there, that doesn't mean that love ends, right? Now, life is full of many things that we just don't see coming, and life can get very messy. But if we love in this life, then we know that that love did come from God. And we know something about God's love. God's love never ends. So, to conclude this morning, we will read one final paragraph from chapter 13. And we're going to learn one last important lesson about love from the Bible. So, reading now from verse 8. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. Now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love. These are beautiful words to finish off a beautiful chapter. But this also reminds us that the purpose of this chapter was actually historically to address a church that was squabbling over lesser things and to help them to set their hearts and minds on the things that really matter. And I hope that's what this sermon does for us today, is it helps us to set our minds on the things that really matter. Those crazy Corinthians, they were arguing over interpretations of prophecy. They were emphasizing the dramatic gifts of tongues over all of the other practices of the church, even though nobody could understand what they were doing when they were speaking in tongues because they didn't have an interpreter. But what they were really doing was emphasizing one thing over everything, and that was their own personal opinions and that they were right. And they were doing this at the expense of the community that God had given them. And so it's in the context of all of this that Paul writes this chapter to begin with, and especially these last words. And it's interesting what he does here. What he really does is he reminds them of the incompleteness of human knowledge. That's something to humble anybody, I would say. He says, when the perfect comes, then the partial will pass away. In other words, all of these gifts of the Spirit that these folks are arguing about, when Jesus comes, none of that is going to matter. Did you speak in tongues? Well, good for you. Did you lead a Bible study? Oh, that's very smart of you. Good job. But you know what? Did you argue and squabble the whole time while you were doing that? What good did any of that do for you then? And I think most of these things that we might argue about in our life, most of these things that we might be tempted to find ourselves squabbling over, could probably be put into the very same category. Things that just aren't going to matter in the end. And so what we really need is some perspective on the situation, on all of the situations in our life, and to think to ourselves, what really matters here? And Paul kind of makes an appeal here to maturity, as we see. That's what Paul does next, I think. I think when he writes this, he says, look, there's childish ways to view things. And hey, we were all there. Once I was a child, once you were a child. We're all childish at times, right? In our time, I should say. But the point here is that there's childish ways to view things and a mature way to view things. And that a mature view should appreciate the bigger picture, appreciate what matters. And that should add wisdom into how we deal with people in our lives. And you know, wisdom realizes how little that we even know in the present, how limited our knowledge in this world truly is. And so I think it's based on that Paul writes here, this last verse, which is so memorable, that there are three things that matter: hope, faith, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And I think that this whole section strongly implies, and I believe this perhaps can be our greatest takeaway of this already very profound and helpful chapter. You know, most things that we are doing here aren't going to matter much when the time comes to meet Jesus face to face. But what will matter is how we have hoped in God. What will matter is how we have trusted in Him, how we have been loyal to Him through all of the ups and downs, hope, faith. But even greater than these magnificent things, and very important, but even more important than this, is how we have loved Jesus by loving the people in our lives. So I think we realize that love is a lofty ideal. It's very high, very high. But from everything that we've read and learned today, that we have seen. But you know, that's okay. Because these are areas where we may be lacking, and I think we probably are all lacking in some of the things we've talked about this morning. But what these are not opportunities to feel shame. No. These are opportunities to grow. All of us are God's children. He loves us so much. And you know what a father loves to see in their children? Growth. And that's what our spiritual father loves to see. He takes joy when we grow. Yes, we're at a place here where we're lacking, we're falling short, but every day is an opportunity for us to make a change, to contemplate and to think about the things that we've learned about love, to measure ourselves against the high ideal, and what changes can we make? We must say to ourselves, what changes can we make so that everything that we've read about this morning can be truer of us tomorrow than they were of us today? Now, the perfect has not yet come, so we all have room to grow. That's also why we have each other, so that we can grow together towards God. Amen? Amen.